At this point, we can see, yes, there is a religion forming around this technocratic movement. If you say God is science, then anything you want to put in God's mouth, you're going to play it out.
The Karamo Report, pursuing the truth, dissolving the complexities of religion, culture, and politics.
All right, today on the Karamo Report, I'm interviewing one of my personal heroes, Mr. Patrick Wood from Technocracy.news. Patrick is one of the individuals who has been leading the fight for almost 50 years of exposing the globalist agenda to destroy the United States of America and enslave the human race functionally under a technocratic regime. He has been exposing not only technocracy and their plans, but also organizations like the Trilateral Commission, the United Nations, Bilderberg, Council on Foreign Relations, and the list goes on of these hodgepodge organizations who are all members of the globalist cult looking to enslave us all. Listen to what Patrick has to say. Even if you don't like it, take heart, accept it. It's true. And we need to be honest with ourselves so we can save our nation and preserve our children's liberty. So everyone, say hello to Mr. Patrick Wood. All right, everyone, please say hello to Patrick Wood, editor-in-chief of Technocracy.news. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So, a lot of people don't even know what technocracy is. Can you first define what it is for our audience?
You bet. This is the standard definition from their own literature in 1937, if you can believe it. That's almost 100 years ago at this point. This is how they defined themselves back then, and it's still true today. It says, this is the direct quote for their magazine. Technocracy is the science of social engineering, number one. The scientific operation of the entire social mechanism, that's all of society, to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. That's controlled consumption, basically. For the first time in human history, it'll be done as a scientific, technical, engineering problem. The definition goes on, however. There will be no place for politics, politicians, finance or financiers, rackets or racketeers. Technocracy will distribute by means of a certificate of distribution available to every citizen from birth to death. So this is a very ugly definition, I realize. People can't understand why this is not political at this point. It's an economic system that's being imposed on us. And that economic system wants to wipe out all politicians wholesale, all of them. If they had the chance to do that in 1934, they would have. In fact, these technocrats at Columbia University, that's where the whole thing started in the first place, they wrote a book. I have, as a rare book, I have a copy of it here. I not in my hand right now, but to show you. But the book basically called for FDR to dismiss Congress, declare himself dictator, and appoint technocrats top to bottom to run the country. No, in their mind, they're thinking, well, what's to discuss? We have the science, we have the ability to do all the stuff by scientific investigation or whatever. So you don't need to have anything in politics to discuss the issues of the day. And you see this antipathy today between the technocrat class and the political class. Mm-hmm. The politicians today don't understand the danger that they're in, because they're going to be, if technocracy wins, they'll all be removed in the end. And whatever they're going to do, I don't know, but it won't be ruling for the sake of the people of the country.
It makes me think of, how would you tie in like COVID and Dr. Fauci in this? Because this is what, and I think it's so similar. I know when you think of technocracy, we think of things like AI and those types of things, but I think that is part of it as well, because it was like our constitutional rights, out the window. It's just this little guy shows up and starts declaring edicts of what the rest of us may do. Do you think that in some way was an example of us experiencing technocracy?
That was the first volley. I think that was the first major victory for the technocrats, for technocracy in general. They had been laying the groundwork, their infrastructure, if you will, for many, many years before that. But COVID was the first all-out assault on humanity. And you can see technocracy through the whole thing, especially, with Fauci standing up to declare himself to be Mr. Science. You can't, you can criticize me, but you can't criticize the science. I'm just the messenger for the science. This is scientism on steroids at this point. And, this is, they're worshiping science as a god.
Mm-hmm.
And when you declare God to be just science, not God that we know, but God, just if you say God is science, then anything you want to put in God's mouth, you're going to play it out at that point. That's exactly what Fauci did, and all the other people as well, like what was her name, Birx.
Yeah, Dr. Deborah Birx. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all these other people around him, they were steeped in scientism. That was obvious to me. But this was the first all-out attack on humanity, and they're doubling down now, I think, and it laid the foundation, conditioned the people, degraded the human immune system, and caused all kinds of problems along the way with people's health, and certainly many people died because of those shots in the first place. Mm-hmm. So this has been a rolling revolution, if you will. Mm-hmm. It's not over. COVID was just the first step. That's the first assault. That's the way I looked at it. And here we are today.
It makes me think I have another question for you regarding like the theological component of this all, because when you mention scientism, it makes me think, I recommend everyone, if they can, pick up a book, Science and Scientism by J.P. Moreland. I think I said the title right. J.P. Moreland is a Christian apologist. And he talks about how scientism is like this religion, like what you alluded to. Can you talk about, from the technocracy standpoint, I do want to get a little bit in your history and the Trilateral Commission, and because it's a lot, many organizations and things to that. But can you talk about the theological aspect of the technocratic movement?
That's a good question. Back in that day, 1932, there was no talk about religion at all. They probably most of them would have said they're atheists, but only they're atheists in relation to God. It doesn't mean that they're not spiritual somehow. You understand what I'm saying when I say they're okay? Atheism is basically says there is no God. That doesn't mean you don't have a God. He's not the true God, right? Mm-hmm. So that, but the philosophy, the religious philosophy, didn't leak through in the 30s for sure. Not in the 40s, not in the 50s, not in the 60s, 70s, and only now, I think, in the last maybe 10 years, you see the religious philosophy coming forward, and it's totally occultic, cultic and occultic. It has they reject God altogether for sure, but it's very dark at this point. Very, very dark philosophy. And more technocrats in Silicon Valley, for instance, are showing up to the party talking about occultic things. So there you go. This is the state of it now. Now, you can't lay that charge to the people in 1932 necessarily, but at this point, we can see, yes, there is a religion forming around this technocratic movement. And I was kind of say one of the criticisms that the technocracy movement received from its own people in the 30s and 40s was that they didn't have any political strategy to, wrapped around themselves, and also probably a religious strategy. And they never addressed that back then. They didn't want. In fact, they hated politicians. If you were a politician, like you wanted to be a politician. Well, if you were back in 1937, 38, and you were running for office, you couldn't even join their organization. They would not let you attend their meetings. They'd run you off, say you're out of here. So they hated politicians back in that day. But now the pragmatic view today, if you want to be successful, to take over the whole world, you have to wrap in a religious component and a political component as well. That doesn't mean that technocracy is not purely economic, but that's just the reality of it. If you want to get people moving in your direction, you have to give them that option, or at least the narrative, right? That you make a difference in politics, that you make a difference in religion or whatever. And it's just smokescreen, but that's what we see today.
Yeah, it's interesting. Okay, so with that being said, it sounds like it's you see a convergence of several authoritarian systems to bring forth this techno-fascist state. Because like you were saying, with technocracy, since it being an economic system, they very well can't get their economic system into play without politics, and they need theology. So that makes me think of like Peter Thiel and his very bizarre, Antichrist lectures. I mean, so this man who is an open homosexual, who was speaking at a supposed Christian conference, which I'm like, why do you guys have an open homosexual speaking at your Christian conference? I mean, they can attend the conference because we want them to get their lives to Jesus Christ, but to be a speaker and play, like, that's bizarre. But I digress from that point. But then this guy who, we'll get to Palantir and those weirdos. But you have Palantir and their whole kind of, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they're the largest government contractor, at least the largest military government contractor we have. And these guys kind of have like this godlike complex, because I was watching CNBC. And this guy was talking about Alex Karp. He's like, and for those who don't know, he's a co-founder and the current CEO of Palantir. And by the way, both Peter Thiel and Alex Karp are on the steering committee for the Bilderberg. But I'm sure they're good guys, right? But this man was talking about Alex Karp like he has a Messiah-like complex. Like he was saying it in a complimentary fashion. I'm like, these guys got a Messiah complex, all right. Can you? And so this makes me think of what you're saying, the convergence of the religious piece. So now you have, people like Peter Thiel giving these lectures on the Antichrist, and you have Elon Musk coming with the political part. So, and his grandfather was involved in the technocratic movement, which people in Canada, which most folks don't know about. So you kind of see in real time, to your point, Patrick, that convergence of these other elements to make their fantasy become a reality. Could you speak to that, please?
You just said it, basically. Peter Thiel is talking about the Antichrist, and not in a biblical sense, for sure. He doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. But his history includes some odd philosophers from Stanford University. That's where he went to school in the first place. And is he genuine in his belief that he's really talking about the Antichrist or something, or if it's just a show? I'm not sure, because I've studied the mind of Peter Thiel as much as I could from literature. I've never met him myself, but he's a very complex person. He was a master strategist from the get-go. Even when he was founding PayPal with Elon Musk, they founded together. He concluded that competition was for suckers. That was a famous saying. And when he was in college, he was a chess master. He was ranked, I think, like number 8 or 9 or something in the world stage for amateur chess players. So he was that kind of had that kind of a mind, and he had a reputation not just playing the game and shaking somebody's hand and good sport. He wanted to crush his competition always. He was obsessed with the game. Then he got out of college, and when he got into business, and he concluded, well, competition is for suckers. What he was alluding to, he committed at that point to always bring a monopoly into play. Whatever he does, it has to crush all competition. He's going to be outside the box and figure out a way to dominate the field that he touches, right? This has been his MO for the whole 25 years now. So you see him today, he's crushed the intelligence world. There's nobody in the world like Palantir. And he had a strategy when he started, how he was going to do it. It included that political side of it, because, well, that's another issue. The political side is important to him, and also the religious side. This was really brought out, I think, this concept of a three-legged stool with Peter Drucker, the famous management consultant from last century. And he said, society rests on a three-legged stool. You have the economic side, the political side, and the spiritual side. That makes sense to me, actually. But I think Peter Thiel picked this up early on in his career. And so he's made sure to nurture these two legs, at least, the spiritual leg and the political leg as well. So you see him picking up J.D. Vance, for instance, as a protege to mentor him into the political stage. He did the same thing in Arizona, by the way, with another politician here, wannabe politician here, by the name of Blake Masters. So he saw early on the need to get onto the national stage politically with these types of people. Now, J.D. Vance is his man in the White House, probably going to be the next president of the country. So Peter Thiel has been executing a plan, a very well-rounded plan to conquer the whole planet at this point. So when you look if you look at Peter Thiel in total, a lot of Christians are I'm not saying this, but a lot of Christians are saying this guy sure sounds like the Antichrist to me, because of all the system, the surveillance system, the pre-crime system, the intelligence system that he's putting in place. Really scary stuff, and people are looking into the book of Revelation that says sure sounds like the mark of the beast to me, the beast system. So
that's what it sounds like to me, Patrick. What's so interesting, knowing how these, I call them the globalist cult, they're a bunch of God wannabes. He probably wants to be the Antichrist. We all know Big Brother is watching us. So what are we going to do about it? Well, this is why the Karama Report has partnered with Mark37.com to help you secure you and your family's information with ghost phones, ghost tablets, and ghost laptops. Now, some of you may say, what is that? Well, the technology you're using was created by the same people who are looking to enslave us. So why would you continue to use their products? Mark37.com, however, has ghost tablets, phones, and laptops so you can use the internet, use your computer, create documents, whatever it is you do on your devices securely. So make sure that you visit Mark37.com, enter in the discount code Karamo at checkout to get savings and secure you and your family's information. The Karama Report needs you, so please like, share, and subscribe. You can also support this project by making a contribution. We greatly appreciate your support. Now back to the show. But I really want to follow up on that point. When you were speaking, I was looking down because I unfortunately don't have the book in front of me, but I purchased the book, The Technological Republic. Have you heard of that book? That
I
Alex
haven't.
Karp, Alex Karp, again, we already addressed, just for the audience reminder, Alex Karp is the co-founder of Palantir with Peter Thiel, and he also sits on the, and he's the CEO currently, and they both sit on the steering committee for the Bilderberg. Got to keep plugging that part in case somebody forgot. But, Alex Karp in his book, The Technological Republic, and I want to ask you about DARPA. He is like singing the praises of DARPA, and the way that him and the whole these techno feudalists, I don't know what the technocrats. We'll just stick with technocrats. There's a lot of words I could call these people. Some I probably shouldn't call them, but they are just so in love with themselves. You can see in their writings, they're gods, and we ought to just bow because they're going to save the West, and that's what they're doing. So these people, and I'm not saying Peter Thiel and Alex Karp specifically themselves, but the folks they're aligned with, they've been engineering destruction in the West for quite some time. Now these people, they're threat creation managers. They create a threat, then they manage the threat. Now they have the solution, which is technocracy. And so what he's talking about, he's singing the praise of DARPA, that if we want to save the West, we have to have more of these DARPA type projects. So I suspect, I don't know if you have any insight in this with Palantir, I think Palantir is nothing more than a DARPA project. I think that Karp, because I forget what Karp's background is, it's not even related to AI technology, neither one of them, from what I understand. And please correct me if I'm wrong. So my opinion, they're simply salesmen. They're extremely gifted, very crafty salesmen and frontmen for a DARPA project. I mean, Karp is singing the praises of DARPA. And, we need to get back into this and have these DARPA-sponsored projects. And this is how we're going to save the West and their allies. So they add in the allies, that way they can justify going off and putting their beast system in other nations. What say you?
Yeah. Well, if you look back to the time when Palantir was founded in the first place, there was a program that the government was trying to launch at that point called Total Information Awareness. It was shot down in flames by the public, actually, and the Congress backed off big time. They scuttled the program. It was basically the CIA was part of it for sure. And so that was a big, everybody's thought, oh, that's a blow against globalism at that point. But they handed the whole project over to Palantir when it was formed in the first place. That's the project that made its way from the government into private industry. And the funds that were used to create Palantir in the first place came from In-Q-Tel. That's the CIA's venture capital firm. They had one back then. And so their first client that Palantir had was the CIA. And for the first few years, that was the only client that they had, the CIA. And basically what they did was recreate the specifications of the surveillance system specified in the total information awareness package. The government couldn't do it, but Palantir could. So they just sidestepped the whole accountability stuff. So it's no wonder at this point that Alex Karp talks about DARPA, because DARPA and CIA are totally linked together. And you have to figure also that there's no ties to the CIA officially at this point. But anybody with a brain should figure out if the CIA ever had a hook in you in the first place, they're never going to let it go. You just go on, you live your life, God bless you, sort of thing. That's not the way that the CIA works. So at this point, I know you could say on one hand that you see the policies that Alex Karp talks about are in sync with the policies like for the CIA. And that's really scary because now this whole system is being exported to the world, to the whole world. The surveillance system that he's created is being spread everywhere. In fact, just a few days ago or 2 weeks ago, when President Trump went to England to dine with Prince or not King Charles, all the tech bros were with him. Elon Musk was there. Peter Thiel was. Alex Karp was there. All the tech bros went with him to get contracts from and invest, money into infrastructure for the UK. At that meeting, whatever, Palantir came away with a $1.2 billion contract for its software for the UK. That's the biggest contract ever, I think, awarded to an outside company. So you figure, okay, that means that NATO is going to get the software lickety split. And so basically all the Western world is going to be surveilled by Palantir before it's done. And what does this mean? Well, you see what's going on Europe right now with all of their draconians talk about digital ID and the central bank digital currency and all that kind of stuff. It just fits hand in glove.
You know what, Patrick, is really interesting. Right after that contract was signed with Palantir with England, that's when Keir Starmer announced. Shortly after that is when Keir Starmer announced the digital ID. So the timing is really interesting.
Yes. Yes. Just a coincidence. No, there's nothing to see here. Don't stretch it. Don't.
Oh my goodness! You know what, Patrick? I always say that if these people didn't have, I don't want to exaggerate, but they have. I don't want to say homicidal, but they definitely have horrible plans for us. If these people didn't have such horrible plans for us, this would be like a comedy show. It would be a comedy because it's so absurd and so obvious. Like, and one of the things I want to point to, you said like Peter Thiel went to Stanford. Now, Patrick, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't Stanford like one of the top recruiting areas for recruiting universities for the CIA?
It has been for a long time. Yeah, exactly.
This story writes itself. So, before we get any further, Patrick, I do want to talk about your background a little bit and how did you get into this? Like, and I want you to get into, I mentioned earlier, like the Trilateral Commission, because that's the thing people need to understand is whether it's Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, Elon Musk, and any of these characters, and that's what these people are. They're characters. I think they're all DARPA frontmen, but they're all these characters. How let me say this: they work in conjunction with other organizations, whether it's the Bilderberg, whether it's Council on Foreign Relations, whether it's Trilateral, any of these groups that all work in concert with one another. So one people don't talk about as much today is Trilateral. So can you tell us, how did you find out about the Trilateral? What are they, and what is their role in these other type of paralleling organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations or the Aspen Institute? How do they all work together?
Wow. Well, back in the 1970s, I was a young financial analyst, and my job was to go out and investigate companies, write reports on them, and deliver it back to my firm, which sold those reports to their clients. And so I kept running across this organization called the Trilateral Commission, and it really puzzled me. I knew something was screwy. But when the Carter administration was basically subsumed by the Trilateral Commission, Carter was a member, Mondale was a member, all his cabinet were members, just freaks me out. So then I ran across, by chance, to say by divine appointment, that I was at a conference away from my home in Scottsdale, Arizona, in New Orleans, and I got seated at a table in a restaurant with Professor Anthony Sutton, who was just excommunicated from Stanford. That he was working for the Hoover Institution for War, Peace, and Revolution, I think it's called. And he was studying the Trilateral Commission. He didn't understand at that point that the importance that the president of Stanford was David Packard of Hewlett Packard fame, and he was a member of the Trilateral Commission. They crushed his career altogether.
Right.
So I ran into him. He's on the rebound. He's trying to figure out what to do with his life. And we shook hands after that breakfast that we had to tell a story. It was too big to ignore. So I was in the printing and publishing business at that time. I said, let's do a newsletter. And we did for some time. And then we produced 2 books, Trilaterals over Washington, volumes 1 and 2. And we became the de facto experts on technocracy of the Trilateral Commission at that point. And of course, we were censored to death. He died in 2002, basically in ignominy. Unfortunately, our book was censored by the largest books chain in the country, and so go figure. But we were censored to death back in those days because of members of the Trilateral Commission being in industry. They nailed us anywhere they could. So all that to say, my sum and our summation back then was that the Trilateral Commission, the only thing that they had in their mind at that point, they said they wanted to create a new international economic order. We didn't understand that was technocracy at the time. I do now, but back then we didn't know it. But we knew they wanted to make a new international economic system. That's what they said. And so we scratched our head. What are they after? Well, all we can figure out at that point was they were after the resources of the world. In other words, they wanted to get the resources away from us and the nation states of the world to put the resources into their hands, not ours. You see this philosophy with the World Economic Forum when Klaus Schwab says by 2030 you'll know nothing and be happy. You won't be happy. But you will. The idea you'll own nothing. What does that mean? Well, it means somebody has to own it, just not you. That means the end of private property altogether. That means the end of national assets, if you will, being held in trust for the people of that country or those countries. And this has been the overriding goal of the Trilateral Commission ever since, to subvert all of the assets of the world into their hands so that they can say, we're the king of the hill now. If you want it, you're going to beg for it. It really is just serious. It's coming so fast at this point. I don't know what we can do.
I just, listening to you talk, it just makes me think, being involved in Republican Party politics, I have this opinion that the Democrat Party, and these people exist in both parties, please everybody understand. But in my observation, the Democrat Party, their idol is sex. Everything is about abortion, LGBTQ, IA+, and I guess we ran out of letters, so we just gonna add a plus at the end to cover everything. So that's their idol. But in the Republican Party, the idol is money. And when you talk about, I don't want to get into Curtis Yarvin and some of these other characters. He's another character. But I know with this technocracy, they, like you said, they want essentially, from what I recall, you like a CEO to run everything, and that it seems to comport with what Yarvin is arguing. But even within the Republican Party, there's this big thing: we need a businessman, we need a businessman, we need a CEO, we need a CEO. Like that's part of the language. But in the Republican Party, the idol is money. It is absolute worship of money. These people will get in front of a crowd, and it angers me so much as a Christian. When someone says, I'm a Christian, there's a level of expectation of how they will conduct themselves consistent with the Holy Bible. The Marxists on the left, they're Marxists. So I don't, they've already, you know what they're about. They've completely given themselves over to Lucifer. But when one says, I am a Christian, there is a level of expectation of your conduct that I've seen is completely contrary to me. It's significantly more wicked because it's an angel. It's a false light. Why am I saying this?
Yeah.
Is that we've gotten to the party to where we are all about businesses, CEOs, that a lot of these multinational corporations go in other countries and engage in abusive practices. One can be a free market lover, a complete capitalist like you, I'm sure you are, and myself as well, but we still can speak truth regarding a lot of the unethical behavior that our corporations are engaging in other countries with the blessing of our government so that they can put resources in the hands of the globalist cult. To your point, I was sharing with the show producer, I was watching a documentary about yesterday I was watching a documentary about the opium trade that England engaged in the 19th century. And since the British Crown did not want to be seen as being drug traffickers, which they were, they instead got some private businesses to do their bidding as the drug traffickers, peddling heroin, causing mass drug addiction in China. Why am I saying this? We see the type of thing still here today that our government can't necessarily go do things. So then they have their fraternity brothers who control certain corporations to go in countries, engage in exploitive practices to then make sure that resources are in the hands of their fellow brethren, for lack of a better term. And then we also see partial nationalization of like Intel. That is not good. Either we're constitutionalists or we're not. Either we follow people or we follow principle. And when you think of these organizations, like you talk about trilateral, can you talk about their relationship with the United Nations? And can you answer this question for me? Do these various entities, whether it's trilateral, World Economic Forum, United Nations, Council of Foreign Relations, do they all have a separate lane that they focus in, or are they doing the exact same things simultaneously? How does that relationship work? Do you know?
Yeah, there's long history on this. When the Trilateral Commission was formed in 1973, fall 1973, by spring of 1974, the whole project of creating a new international economic order was passed off to the United Nations. This was a general resolution 3201 and 3202 that basically said that the United Nations is dedicated to creating a new international economic order. The same language. David Rockefeller was a huge supporter back then of the United Nations. In fact, the land that the UN stood on at that point was donated to them by the Rockefeller family back in the 30s or 40s, rather. And so there was a tight relationship. And Rockefeller fed that doctrine to the United Nations. And from that day on, they conspired to create a new economic system, period. Again, I see it as technocracy. So when 1992 roll around, and the Agenda 21 was created at the Rio conference, the backdrop of that was there was operatives working for the Trilateral Commission, like Gru Harlem Brundtland, Jim O'Neill, or Mac Deal, rather. They wrote books and to fund all of the doctrine of Agenda 21. Even to this day, you ask somebody who at the United Nations, who do they say that is the mother of sustainable development? They'll tell you right off, it's Gru Harlem Brundtland. She was a member of the Trilateral Commission when she wrote that document. So you see, going forward, the whole thing of sustainable development, biodiversity, all those things were created by members of the Trilateral Commission for the Trilateral Commission to take over, to accelerate. That's a good word. To accelerate the takeover of the resources of the world. This is why Agenda 21 was so anti-property rights. It was, when you see the big picture, that it was all about property in the first place. Everything seems to make sense at this point. Why did or not Obama, but Biden? Why did Biden, for instance, start this 30 by 30 program to get all of the 30% of the remaining land of America into federal coffers? That's who wanted that? Nobody, but he just declared it. This is going to be like a huge land grab for them. And you see this in other countries as well. All these heritage zones have been declared around the world by the United Nations. They're off limits to the countries, the host countries. It's crazy. So when you see how important property rights for these were for these people, you get the idea that the end goal is to strip everybody of their right to own property, and in addition to that, even to own themselves.
You know, it makes me think. I want to say a quote when you talked about the Rockefeller family, and as you were talking, I'm starting to think when you're talking about like that document for the UN agenda, at the Rio conference where they had, and the woman from the Trilateral Commission was the one who created the document. And you talk about the Rockefeller family. Two things popped in my mind, and I had to pull up this quote. This is a quote right from David Rockefeller, and I'm sure you probably know the quote I'm going to say, so the audience may not know. For more than a century, ideological extremists at either end of the political spectrum have seized upon well-publicized incidents, such as my encounter with Castro to attack the Rockefeller family for the inordinate influence they claim we wield over American political and economic institutions. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I'm proud of it. So, and I'm sure you've heard this quote. I'm sure you've read this quote. I'm sure you have the book from his.
He said that. That's exactly. He said that.
Yeah, it's in his memoirs. I have the book on my shelf. So the thing about these God wannabes, they don't care. This is what one of the things I want to impress upon the audience. Mm-hmm. They don't care. They tell you what they're going to do. They hate you. They hate you. They see us as the unwashed masses. They are gods. They are like Lucifer is their mentor. They are gods. They're smarter than the rest of us, and we all need to bow to them. That is how they operate. That's how they see themselves. And they brag about, for him to say this as an American, to openly admit that I am working against my own nation and I am part of a secret cabal who's trying to build a one world government. He said it. So it's like, at what point do we start to take them seriously? Yeah. And stop acting like, oh, these people who are talking about this are just a bunch of conspiracy theorists. And what I've been thinking, because I asked you earlier about, like, I haven't heard much about the Trilateral very much as of late, but they're still around. As I wonder, Patrick, if you could comment on this. Is it that these organizations are, as you mentioned, like the woman who developed that document for the UN, is it that they just develop new organizations to kind of morph in and out as the public awareness increases? Because I've seen people thinking like the World Economic Forum has been defeated. They'll be stopped. It's like, no, they're not. They'll just create they're like a hydra. You cut off one head or beat down one head, they just create another. What say you to that?
The World Economic Forum in the first place was sponsored, if you will, by Henry Kissinger in the late 60s, when he mentored Klaus Schwab to go and do that, to start this organization in Europe. It was a Trilateral Commission, a project from the get-go. So over the years, they distanced themselves from the Trilateral Commission. I say they weren't distanced at all, but publicly, right? They didn't talk about each other. Now that Klaus Schwab is gone, who comes in to be the co-leader of the World Economic Forum? Larry Fink, a member of the Trilateral Commission.
Wow. So
how can you make this up?
So they're
it started back then, and now it's say the rooster has come home, right, to rest, right, and it's crazy. But
I apologize for really cutting you off because I wanted you to expound on this. So it from what you're saying, the Trilateral is really the granddaddy of them all.
Yes, absolutely. Their hands have been in everything along the way. And there's other trilaterals working right now as well. How about Keir Starmer from the UK? He's a member. Tony Blair was a member once upon a time. He's not now, but he's totally aligned with the Trilateral Commission. You have people like the Premier of Canada right now. He's also a member of the Trilateral Commission. So, it's like, okay, where do these people come from? Well, they've always been there along the way. We saw them in every administration, including Biden, Obama, George W., the Clintons. Both Clinton and Gore were members of the Trilateral Commission.
Wow.
You can't make it up. Okay. George Bush, H.W. Bush, who was president and vice president under Reagan, was a member of the Trilateral Commission, one of the founding members of the Trilateral Commission. Do you think they knew about the new international economic order? Yes, they did, because everybody quotes HW as with this famous speech about the we're going to create a new world order, and we will.
They're God wannabes.
I know.
They are. They don't care because I think, and I want your thoughts on this. I feel like they know that this stuff sounds so outrageous that unless you've either done a deep dive or experienced it, and I'm sure you've experienced and probably had some nasty dust ups with these people. I'm sure they haven't, you've been involved in this for well over 40 years. I'm actually more than that, almost 50 years, if I'm correct, since the 70s.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah, so you've been involved in this fight for almost 50 years. So I'm pretty positive you've had some nasty dust ups with these people. I mean, I've never encountered trilaterals that I know of, but some from some other groups I have encountered. So these people are scary people. But I think that the things that they're saying and doing are just so outrageous. The average person just doesn't take it seriously because I feel like the average person is projecting. Like, I wouldn't do anything like that. What kind of psycho would? Well, this is exactly the psychos do. And I also believe, and we did an episode about this on the show, of how these various entities, how they recruit, train, and deploy their people into public office. Because I remember when I first got started in politics, I had someone approach me about an organization they thought I should start getting involved with. And I won't repeat the organization, but they invited me to go to like some type of meeting or summit. They said, hey, I should go. I look at the, I look into the organization, and Liz Cheney is a board member. I'm like, no thanks.
Gosh.
So what they do is they recruit people if they feel like you have a certain skill set that they can utilize. And then once they recruit you, and they have what I call these re-education camps, they basically re-educate you into their thinking. And then once they re-educate you into their thinking, now when it's time for you to either put you into a place of business, or if they want you in politics, they make sure that their people will bankroll you and bankroll you to make sure you win. And the thing about it is, I blame the American people, because people complain about money in politics. If people did their proper homework on these politicians, a lot of these criminals they wouldn't keep electing. But unfortunately, what do people go on? Commercials, billboards, ads and yard signs. So we'll let how many commercials, how many signs, how many cute little signs, and then this hard hat, rolled up sleeves, loose necktie commercials that we see to influence our behavior, and we vote based on that. So we've allowed this system to perpetuate, but that's how it works. That's been my observation. So that's how they're able to get their people in. And then once they have one of their people elected into office, then that elected official goes and bring in the minions who are also members of these societies and organizations, and then place them as staffers to go off, or various appointees to carry off the bidding. And what I see from these guys, sometimes I like to call it techno-feudalism as well, but it's almost like they want to, I know I apologize to the audience, especially for throwing around all these terms, but they did, that's why I call it like they have these hammers, because they use little bits and pieces of various ideologies to advance a singular cause. Like, and I'm sure you're aware, like the technocrats and Marxists at that time, they hated each other. You know, even though there's so many parallels we see from the authoritarian perspective. So it's like you have the same globalist call, and whether it's trilateral, Bilderberg, Council of Foreign Relations, United Nations, then they have their people who act like Marxists, and they have their people act like technocrats, and all of it is about building and creating this global system of absolute utter control. Where does Curtis Yarvin come in as their pseudo intellectual? He, in my opinion, is to Palantir and the technocrats with what Yuval Noah Harari is to the World Economic Forum. What say you on that?
Wow, yeah, that's good. That's a good analysis. Number one, Peter Thiel calls Curtis Yarvin his house philosopher. I'm serious. He does. He did say that.
I believe it.
Well, Curtis Yarvin was funded originally by Peter Thiel in his company. He was a tech guy in Silicon Valley. So Peter Thiel has known Yarvin from the get-go. And so the philosophy that he developed, and believe me, this is crackpot. Yarvin doesn't have any more credentials than we do to invent philosophy. He doesn't have a degree in it. He has no sense of what philosophy is. If he could quote any former philosopher in history, he couldn't do it. So whatever he's doing at this point, most of his philosophy came from another guy from the UK by the name of Nick Land, Land.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is off the charts as far as weirdness is concerned.
He's an occultist.
And I don't even want to get into it with you because it twists my mind. I don't want to twist yours either. But between the two of these people, they're totally unplugged from reality. So when Curtis Yarvin came into the picture as a philosopher that's fueling Peter Thiel and all of the stuff he's doing, including the political incursions with J.D. Vance, et cetera. And at this point, you look, what are they saying at this point? Well, Peter Thiel has already said that democracy is over, so that's not an option. And then Curtis Yarvin comes in and says, with this dark Enlightenment philosophy, that, well, you have to destroy capitalism and democracy. You have to implement a monarchy to see you through whatever to the next stage is. And then you have to create these sovereign corporations that will own everything in society. And basically, that's the end of the nation state. It's absolutely insane. But this has been the biggest betrayal in the history of the world, in my opinion, for all the populists who were hoping for something else out of the Trump administration, and all the MAGA movement especially. They thought, well, we're going to get the government off our back, and we're going to reverse the tide maybe and get some relief in America. Not so. They came in with technocrats swarming all over Washington, D.C., implementing Curtis Yarvin's philosophy. For instance, the RAGE philosophy of retire all government employees. That came from Curtis Yarvin. It's in writing. So when Elon Musk came in and started to fire all the government employees and run off others, this was according to RAGE, the rage doctrine that came from Curtis Yarvin. And that's not all, but that's just one example, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on here? Well, they're using that philosophy, whatever the case, they're using that philosophy to basically flip the country at this point into an AI-run scientific dictatorship. That's all you can say. So for every employee that got run off, there was an AI to replace them, at least their function. And this process is continuing today. There's 109 Doge teams operating in the government, the federal government right now. Every agency is covered at this point. And they're doing the same thing. They're releasing the data, getting it into the cloud. They're running off employees so that AI can come in and take their place, at least functionally. And in the meantime, the public has fed the line, well, we're saving money. Governments could be more efficient. I'm sorry. That was never the plan from the get-go. So when I say this is it's been the biggest betrayal of a people in the history of the world, I'm convinced at this point there'll be nothing more grandiose than this. Wow. It's just crazy stuff.
I want to respect your time, but your words are really sobering. In many regards, it's it's sobering in many regards, and it just has me thinking about how dangerous AI is going to be. And it's like AI, I'm sure you agree, it's a tool. It's like a gun. It's like anything else. It's like a pencil,
Yes.
It's a tool. But in the hands of these technocrats, it is going to bring an unimaginable tyranny on our people. Yes. Like a couple months ago, I interviewed Alex Newman, and we were discussing, I don't know why it escapes me, democide. We were discussing. So democide specifically, it was a study done by the University of Hawaii regarding how efficient governments were at democide in the 20th century compared to all other centuries combined. And one of the reasons governments are more efficient at democide is because of the increase in weaponry. I apologize for extending this interview longer, and like I said, I'm gonna wrap it up out of respect for your time. But how much more efficient will governments be with democide? Because what they could do with a gun or a cannon or even a bomb, AI could be potentially so much more lethal. And then there's the whole other piece of AI draining resources and all that from the AI data centers. And I don't want to get off into that because for time's sake, but how much more efficient will governments be at democide or any other form of tyranny with AI? Can you speak to that, please?
We had a taste of that during COVID. I call it the Great Panic of 2020, but other people say otherwise. But you had a taste of how silent genocide would work, because everybody thought it was about COVID, and they're going to get well with a shot. And then they took the shots worldwide, not just in America. The whole world had, 72% of the world population had at least one shot along the way. How many millions of people have died since from those shots? Well, everybody says, well, that was just the bad luck. If you died, for whatever reason. This was played out in real time with real people, and nobody is really calling it genocide. But that's exactly what happened. So at this point, you see, Curtis Yarvin, he talks about a silent genocide where people will just be driven into a psychotic state where they can only be mollified by computer games and virtual reality stuff, and universal basic income to keep them alive, maybe barely alive. And you see the attrition of the human population at that point dropping, and probably nobody will recognize it as a planned democide, if you will, at that point. But it's happening right before our eyes right now, I think.
Wow. Well, in closing, thank you so much, Patrick, for joining me. I've been, like I said, I've been wanting to interview you for quite some time, and thank you for your work and what you've done, because people like myself, we stand on your shoulders. The work you've done for all these years to help expose this evil plan and plot. We wouldn't have known about these monsters if it wasn't for you and your work and people like you. So thank you, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Second, can you tell us in closing, just as a Christian, how should we respond? Because oftentimes I know people they don't want to hear it because it's so terrifying, it's so overwhelming. And it's like these people are so powerful. They have billions, trillions of dollars at their disposal. They corrupt every level of government. What do we do? And I mean that two ways, just from a spiritual perspective as a Christian, and also from a practical perspective. What do we do? And that will be the final word.
I'll tell you, number one, for a Christian, now's the time to get serious about what God said in his Bible, in his book. If you're somehow hazy on what he said, you have to get in and read it for yourself, because the Bible has so much to say about where we are in history and where we're headed. This is the only source of truth that we can rely on at this point. Certainly not the internet. Oh my gosh! And so, that's a certitude for Christians to be involved with God's word and His plan. Having said that, the Apostle Paul referred to himself as an ambassador in chains for Christ. We should be all acting as ambassadors, not as mudslingers, not as gunslingers or whatever. We should be ambassadors, able to speak to people in ways that they can understand, to tell them what's going on in the world. We're not going to change God's plan on that, because you can't do that. But nevertheless, we're sent into the world to be ambassadors, to rescue people out of the world if we can, and at least to tell the remaining ones what's going on. And like the stuff we're talking about right. And this is an interview. And then there's another aspect of being an ambassador, and that's the idea of protection of God's people. When you, like, if you're an ambassador to France, for instance, and there were some citizens that went American citizens who went off the rails, or the law came after them or something like that, they immediately run to the embassy to seek protection. That's what the embassy's there for, right? Is to protect those citizens from stuff going on wrong on the country. Well, we have a role as ambassadors for Christ to protect people in the world as well, and other Christians. I'm not talking about non-Christians, but other Christians as well. They're like sheep running around, not understanding where the sun comes up for the most part. So you have to have mercy on these people. That this is our role in the world. So beyond that, the practical implications of this times are going to get really hard, I think. We have to be prepared, like Paul was always prepared, to walk down the road with a shirt on his back, knowing that God will take care of him wherever he went. And he did, until he died. And we should have a mindset at this point. If you're called to that, when you get squeezed out of the system and you have nowhere to go, that God will take you through to a new place where you can exercise your spiritual gifts, etc. But we need to be prepared at some point to give it all up. And that doesn't mean you're going to have to give it up, but just be prepared for it, because there may be a time in history and the future that demand might be put on us. Just imagine the people in Christians in the Mideast, for instance. These Christians over there, they could be killed at any time. They know it. And so they're ready to flee. If they have to flee for their lives, they'll do it, right? We're not in that position right now in America. It could get that bad, but at this point, we need to be prepared. And what's in between your ears, that's your engine that God gave to you to think these things through and also absorb His word so that you can have an appropriate answer to anybody that you face.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. Thank you. I appreciate you for joining the Karama Report. God bless.
You bet. I appreciate it.
All right, everyone. I hope you liked that interview with Mr. Patrick Wood. Learned so much about what we're up against, and let's equip ourselves so we can save our republic. And most importantly, let's be about the business of spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ. So make sure that you like, share, subscribe, and if you feel so inclined, give a generous contribution, because it does cost to run this show. God bless. See you next time on the Karama Report.